was a consequence of increasing prosperity, which, curiously enough, just seemed to bring out greed and selfishness. But even if she knew why all this happened, it didn't make it any easier to bear. The rest of the world might become as rude as it wished, but this was not the way of things in Botswana, and she would always defend the old Botswana way of doing things. Life was far better, thought Mma Ramotswe, if we knew who we were. In the days when she was a schoolgirl in Mochudi, the village in which she had been born, everybody had known exactly who you were, and they often knew exactly who your parents and your parents' parents had been. Today, when she went back to Mochudi, people would greet her as if she'd barely been away. Her presence needed no explanation. And even here, in Gaborone, where things had grown so much, people still knew precisely who she was. They would know that she was Precious Ramotswe, founder of the #1 Ladies' Detective Agency, daughter of the late Obed Ramotswe, and now the wife, after a rather protracted engagement, of that most gracious of mechanics, Mr. J.L.B. Matekoni, proprietor of Tlokweng Road Speedy Motors. And some of them at least would also know that she lived in Zebra Drive, that she had a tiny white van, and that she employed one Grace Makutsi as her assistant. And so the ramifications of relationships and ties would spread further outwards, and the number of things that might be known would grow. Some might know that Mma Makutsi had a brother, Richard, who was now late, that she had achieved the previously unheard-of result of 97% in the final examinations of the Botswana Secretarial College, and that, following upon the success of the Kalahari Typing School for Men, she had recently moved to a rather better house in Extension 2. Knowledge of this sort, everyday human knowledge, helped to keep society together, and made it difficult to scrape the car of another without feeling guilty about it, and without doing something to let the owner know. Not that this appeared to make any difference to that selfish woman in the car, who had left the scrape unreported, who clearly did not care. But there was no point in throwing up one's hands in despair. People had always done that, the throwing up of hands, the shrug. But one got nowhere in doing so. The world might have changed for the worse in some respects, but in others it was a much better place, and it was important to remember this. Lights went off in some places, but went on in others. Look at Africa. There had been so much to shake one's head over, corruption, civil wars, and the rest. But there was also so much which was now much better. There had been slavery in the past, and all the suffering which that had brought. And there had been all the cruelties of apartheid, just those few miles away over the border. But all that was now over. There had been ignorance, but now more and more people were learning to write, and were graduating from universities. Women had been held in such servitude, and now they could vote, and express themselves, and claim lives for themselves, even if there were still many men who didn't want such things to be. These were the good things that happened, and one had to remember them. Mma Ramotswe raised her teacup to her lips and looked out over the brim. At the edge of the car park, immediately in front of the cafe, a small market had been set up, with traders' stalls and trays of colourful goods. She watched as a man attempted to persuade a customer to buy a pair of sunglasses. The woman tried on several pairs, but wasn't satisfied, and moved on to the next stall. There, she pointed to a small piece of silver jewellery, a bangle, and the trader, a short man wearing a wide-brimmed felt hat, passed it across to her to try on. Mma Ramotswe watched as the woman held out her wrist to be admired by the trader, who nodded encouragement. But the woman seemed not to agree with his verdict, and handed the bangle back, pointing to another item at the back of the stall. And at that moment, while the trader turned round to stretch for whatever it was that she'd singled out, the woman quickly slipped another bangle into the pocket of the jacket she was wearing. Mma Ramotswe gasped. This time she could not sit back and allow a crime to be committed before her very eyes. If people did nothing, then no wonder that things were getting worse. So she stood up and began to walk firmly towards the stall where the woman had now engaged the trader in earnest discussion about the merits of the merchandise which he was showing her. "Excuse me, Mma." The voice came from behind her, and Mma Ramotswe turned round to see who had addressed her. It was the waitress, a young woman whom Mma Ramotswe hadn't seen at the cafe before. "Yes, Mma. What is it?" The waitress pointed an accusing finger at her. "You cannot run away like that," she said. "I saw you. You're trying to go away without paying the bill. I saw you." For a moment, Mma Ramotswe was unable to speak. The accusation was a terrible one, and so unwarranted. Of course she hadn't been trying to get away without paying the bill. She would never do such a thing. All she was doing was trying to stop a crime being committed before her eyes. She recovered herself sufficiently to reply, "I am not trying to go away, Mma," she said. "I am just trying to stop that person over there from stealing from that man. Then I would have come back to pay." The waitress smiled knowingly. "They all find some excuse," she said. "Every day there are people like you. They come and eat our food, and then they run away and hide. You people are all the same." Mma Ramotswe looked over towards the stall. The woman had begun to walk away, presumably with the bangle still firmly in her pocket. It would now be too late to do anything about it, and all because of this silly young woman who had misunderstood what she was doing. She went back to her table and sat down. "Bring me the bill," she said. "I will pay it straight away." The waitress stared at her. "I will bring you the bill," she said, "but I shall have to add something for myself. I will have to add this: if you do not want me to call the police and tell them how you tried to run away." As the waitress went off to fetch the bill, Mma Ramotswe glanced around her to see if people at the neighbouring tables had witnessed the scene. At the table next to hers, a woman sat with her 2 young children, who were sipping with evident pleasure at large milkshakes. The woman smiled at Mma Ramotswe, and then turned her attention back to the children. She hadn't seen anything, thought Mma Ramotswe. But then the woman leaned across the table and addressed a remark to her. "Bad luck, Mma," she said. "They are too quick in this place. It's easier to run away at the hotels." For a few minutes, Mma Ramotswe sat in complete silence, reflecting on what she had seen. It was remarkable. Within a very short space of time, she had seen an instance of barefaced theft, had encountered a waitress who thought nothing of extorting money, and then, to bring the whole matter to a shameful conclusion, the woman at the next table had disclosed a thoroughly dishonest view of the world. Mma Ramotswe was frankly astonished. She thought of what her father, the late Obed Ramotswe, a fine judge of cattle, but also a man of the utmost propriety, would have thought of